Our special guest today is Grace Shirley. As a member of the University of Wisconsin's women's hockey team, Grace and her teammates, including her older sister Sophie, won the NCAA Women's Ice Hockey Championships in 2021 and 2023. Even as Grace earned academic All Big Ten Conference honors 3 times, she struggled with self-doubt. While competing for Providence College as a graduate transfer in 2023 and 2024, Grace pursued a master's degree in counseling to become a licensed mental health counselor. She is currently an academic success coordinator at Curry College in Milton, Massachusetts. Grace Shirley, welcome to Next Steps Forward.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thanks for being here. And we know you started your new job at Curry College very recently, and so we're not going to tell them that you're over here playing hooky. So hopefully no one's listening right now. So Grace, let's get into it. Not to sound or be stereotypical, but I think even today that more young girls dream of being figure skaters rather than hockey players. What was it about hockey that made you want to lace up your skates and play? Was it your older sister Sophie that played, or did something else inspire you?
Yeah, for sure. I think definitely my older sister, Sophie. I also had two older brothers, Colin and Keenan. So I kind of grew up in a big hockey family. So it was definitely looking up to them. I was the youngest of four. So I looked up to them and wanted to be like them. And so that's kind of what led me to hockey.
And just sort of being from Canada, the national pastime, and that's kind of all you knew and what you did.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's freezing cold half the year there. So we had a backyard rink my dad would put in every year. And so we pretty much lived out there as kids. It was pretty inevitable.
And being the youngest of four, were you just dragged around and schlepped around everybody else's hockey games?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I was there. I always remember like my sister and I too, we'd be at my brother's hockey games, watching, bringing our mini sticks to the rinks and things like that. So, yeah, it was certainly kind of a big part of my life, especially, growing up.
And how did hockey begin to shape your life as you grew up? You mentioned your older siblings, but maybe more specifically, your schedule, your friendships, and your sense of identity and purpose.
Yeah, for sure. I think about kind of those later years of high school, I think in particular, is when kind of started to take the game a little bit more serious. There was a ton of sacrifices, whether it was kind of the social aspect of my life, like weekends and things like that. I was preparing for games. And so it definitely, had a huge part. It was a huge part of my life, still is to this day. But yeah, I would certainly say I think around that high school mark is kind of when it certainly kind of took over a little bit of my life there.
And when you make that transfer, you talk about high school and kids are transitioning to going out, prom, dating, academics, going to college, sports. How did you balance it? Like, did one take precedent over the other, or did you make a balance of both?
I mean, that actually brought up a good point. I remember my old coach at Wisconsin said he knew very few players that could balance, the sport with their school and with the social life. He was like, those three things are really hard to balance. And I will say that I was had a tough time with that in high school. I would say specifically, I was all hockey. Like it was, I had these goals in mind and these aspirations to get to, obviously a college like Wisconsin. And so I will say that there was a lot of social kind of sacrifices there. I just remember, those weekends and stuff, seeing friends kind of out and doing different things like that. And I was pretty much stuck in, like I'd mentioned, preparing for games and things like that. I definitely don't regret any of it because I know without those sacrifices, I wouldn't have got to where I am today. But yeah, there was definitely a ton of sacrifices, especially in the social aspects.
And having friends of mine whose kids play hockey, and I know there's a huge travel component to it. Did hopping in the van or hopping in a plane and traveling somewhere for a hockey tournament, did that help alleviate some of those, I don't say missed opportunities, but missing your friends on the weekend, just not being there, sort of out of sight, out of mind?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think so. And I think even kind of going back, I was always, growing up, I was always on the boys team. And so I was always kind of the only girl. So it was a little bit of a different like aspect in terms of that. But yeah, I definitely do think it was. And I had like a purpose behind what I was doing. Like I had these goals and things like that. So, having that in mind when I was, when I had to say no to different social events and things like that, like I had my goals and I knew at the end of the day that it was going to help me reach those. So, yeah, that certainly helped out kind of having that.
And the last question on this, did that weigh on you mentally at all? Or were you just so focused and driven, knowing that you wanted to get to that next level, that you were going to do whatever it took?
I would say that kind of towards the tail end of like high school and things like that, as I began missing out on some stuff, I definitely found myself taking the game so seriously. There was times where I was kind of losing the sense of like it is a game and I'm supposed to be having fun. And so I think, some of that was weighing on me a little bit mentally, but again, I was just so focused on getting to the next level and doing everything that I could within those high school years to really prepare me to that for that jump to college.
A few minutes ago, you talked about you and your sister grabbing your little sticks and hopping on the ice, following your brothers around. How old were you when you played your very first hockey game, and what stands out most in your memory from that day?
Yeah, I would have been about probably 6 years old. I can't remember the exact game or anything, but like I said, like I played with the boys on kind of on always on those teams, and I actually always played with my cousin, who's actually plays with the Bridgeport Islanders, the farm team of the New York Islanders. But so I was always on a boys team. Um, Probably wasn't too much of a standout player back then, especially being the only girl out there. I struggled a little bit, but definitely have like the best and most fond memories of that period.
Well, I'm not sure if you know this or not, but I live in Stamford, Connecticut, so Bridgeport is our farm team down the road. And actually, tonight, my daughter and her boyfriend are going to the New York Islanders game, and so I'll mention that to her tonight. So just FYI, meaningless
Yeah.
information, useless information. So what position or positions did you play, and why did you choose it, or was it chosen for you?
Yeah, so I was always a forward. My sister was always a forward, so I'd say I was probably following her footsteps a little bit. I always liked to score goals, so that's probably why I chose forward. But yeah, I was always either a centerman or a right winger. I think it kind of depended on where I was playing. So when I played with the boys a little bit, I think up until around grade 8, I was always a right winger. And then as I made the transition to girls hockey, I was a centerman. It kind of allowed me to become just more involved in every play, just kind of all over on the ice. And then when I made the step to the University of Wisconsin, shifted back to right wing, and then Providence, I was back at center. So kind of changed around a little bit, but always a forward. Always kind of, like to score goals.
And again, just not being too stereotypical, but going back to how boys mature more physically than girls do at that age, and certainly not mentally. We're not going to go down that path. Do you think that going around, I think you said eighth grade is when you made the transition, just the physicality of playing from the boys' side, transitioning to girls, do you think that helped you from a speed and strength perspective, or was it just sort of a natural ability that you had, or a little bit of both?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I do think there were like so many, good qualities that I gained from playing with the boys. Like it definitely was elevated. They were stronger, they were faster. And so there was that component. I do think it really prepared me well for kind of making that transition. So I really have to kind of attribute a lot to my time spent in boys hockey. They definitely pushed me. They weren't easy on me by any means, but I definitely do think that it really helped to kind of prepare me to always kind of develop, get better because I didn't want to be, the one slowing the game down or anything like that. I just wanted to fit in. So I definitely do think that it really helped to kind of enhance my performance.
Well, that was my next question. You read my mind. You said they weren't easy on you. Do you find that they were either trying to be harder on you, saying you didn't belong there, or were they afraid to cross-check you because you had a ponytail?
Hmm. I definitely don't think they were easy on me by any means. I can remember specifically, I can remember it was Pee Wee hockey. It was like the first year of hitting and stuff like that. I definitely took some hits, made me tough. I remember my old coach would kind of joke around with my dad, just saying that I was pretty tough out there. But I do think I held my own, but I definitely don't think they were easy on me by any means. At the end of the day, I can appreciate because I know it did make me better.
Life lessons, right?
Yes, exactly.
And what was the moment, if you can remember, when you knew hockey wasn't just something you were trying out, it was something that you loved?
I would say that definitely came from just being at home on the backyard rinks with my family. I think that's really where my love for the game grew. I can remember just these cold evenings, like around the holidays, Christmas Eve, things like that. I'd be on, at the outdoor rink with my brothers, my sister, my extended family, my cousin just lived a couple blocks away and stuff. So just getting the whole family out there on the backyard rinks, that was definitely where I kind of found that passion for hockey.
And you mentioned playing hockey with your family. Who inspired you in those days and helped you believe you could excel in the sport? Was it the coach, your family, teammates, a college or pro athlete?
Oh, I could go on forever about this. There were so many people. I think definitely my family first and foremost. I always, think back to the times with my dad specifically. Like I can just remember having the worst game of my life, and he'd be sitting there just trying to pick up these like microscopic tidbits that I did well, just to kind of help me, maintain confidence and things. And that goes for my entire family. They're always supporting me, always coming to my games, my brothers showing up at my games, things like that always meant a ton to me. Um, and then, of course, my sister, just a huge role model, especially, as a female in the game. She also went through, boys hockey. So she was someone that I always look up to. She's, to this day, my biggest role model. And then if I think to some coaches, someone that stands out to me is I had it was a skills coach. His name was Scott Dutar. He was super influential in my whole hockey career. I just remember me and my sister would be out skating with him early mornings before school. It'd be like 6, 7 a.m. and we'd be out there in like, the midwinter days. It wasn't always easy, but he always supported me. He'd show up at my games and it meant a ton. So there are really so many people that just had such a huge impact on my hockey career.
I know your sister keeps coming up here throughout the conversation today. I know she was with you at Wisconsin, won 2 titles. What's the age difference?
So she's 2 years older.
Okay.
It was nice. It kind of worked out. She actually postponed a year, and then with COVID, we ended up getting 4 full years together, which is pretty unheard of. I mean, typically because of our 2-year age difference, we should have expected two, but we got 4 years together. So yeah, it was really really worked out nicely.
As the competition level rose, did the sport start to feel different, maybe more serious or more pressure filled? Or is it something you relished because you were a standout athlete?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think kind of toward the tail end of high school, as those conversations between like scouts and things like that, people were always watching you, the pressure began to grow. And I think specifically for me, I'm just someone I put quite a bit of pressure on myself. I'm pretty tough on myself. I have high expectations. So I definitely found that kind of towards that, grade 11, grade 12, that kind of time in my life, the sport maybe stopped feeling so much like a game that I truly loved, and it started, more so feeling like it was kind of like a job, and it was something that I needed to succeed at. So that's kind of where, it did take a little bit of a turn.
And we'll get this a little bit later in the show, but you talk about being tough on yourself. Is that just from the hockey perspective, or is that in all aspects of your life?
I would definitely say it's all aspects of my life. I don't know. I've just always kind of been like that. I've yeah, always just kind of had these high level expectations for myself, and if things aren't working out, I tend to be a little bit harder on myself. I think it's and like it's added to a lot of success in my life. But then again, yeah, it does kind of take a toll eventually mentally.
Take a deep breath. It's okay.
Yes, exactly.
So, anyone involved in youth athletics, and especially hockey, knows that the entire family often makes sacrifices, financial and otherwise, so kids can pursue that sport. What were some of the sacrifices that you and your family made, and how'd your family support you through that journey?
Yeah, honestly, my family, honestly, looking back, like all the financial sacrifice, they had 4 kids that were all involved in the sport of hockey. The time commitments, sitting in the freezing cold rinks, the traveling, all that. My parents have, sacrificed so much for all 4 of us kids. And to this day, I honestly don't know how they did it. Like, I don't know how they did it. But I'm so grateful for everything. And I know all of us siblings really are, because we know that we wouldn't be where we are today. We wouldn't have, become the people that we are today without them and all those sacrifices that they've made. So, yeah, it honestly makes me emotional thinking about it, but they are, I just can't thank them enough for everything.
How did the transition from high school or club hockey to college level play challenge you physically and mentally?
It was definitely a big step. I think, physically, when you get to that level, girls are bigger, they're faster, they're stronger. And so it was definitely an adjustment that I had to make. I remember kind of stepping into that, the locker room in Wisconsin, you just notice, wow, these girls are, they're developed and um, they're ready for this college level. And so I think that was a big jump for me. And then mentally, that adjustment from you come from being a top end, like high end player on your high school team, and now you're, amongst the top players in the entire country. at a school like Wisconsin. So, that in terms of confidence and just kind of, being able to accept maybe a new role on a team was definitely something that um, I had to kind of work on. And, it's something that I think is an adjustment for a lot of athletes face mentally.
Well, maybe as a follow-up to that, you mentioned being a top athlete in your high school team and in the region, and then you go to the most successful women's hockey team in NCAA sports. What's that like? Like, how daunting of a task or a mindset is that, knowing like you're going from bright lights in Saskatchewan, Canada, to bright lights, Madison, Wisconsin, which is bigger bright lights.
Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah. And I think that was honestly something that I maybe wasn't quite prepared for. Like I knew that I was, a top end player within those high school years, but I didn't quite know where I was matching up at that level. So it was definitely kind of maybe a little bit of a surprise to me, but at the same time, it was something that I appreciated because I knew that if I was surrounded by these types of players, that it would only make me better. So it was kind of aspects of both, but it was definitely a transition, that's for sure.
And then, as you mentioned earlier, that you're tough on yourself in all aspects of your life. Did you relish that challenge, knowing that you're on the bigger stage with bigger lights?
Yeah, for sure. I think so. I mean, ever since I was young, I've always kind of been trying to get better, improve, and figure out ways that I could, just I guess improve my overall game. And so that was definitely something that I took with me into those years at Wisconsin. I definitely think that, a ton of development did occur because I kind of had that mindset.
When you were deciding on colleges, what about the Wisconsin program stood out to you? And what made you believe that you were the right fit for the Badgers and they were the right fit for you?
Yeah, so I think definitely looking at Wisconsin, just the tradition of excellence. Like you look at their track record, and they're just such a tremendous school. They attract so much high-end talent, and I know that going to a school like Wisconsin would, um, kind of encourage me, or I guess motivate me to become the best player I could be. When you're practicing with and against the top players in the country, I think it's inevitable. You are just going to get better. Um, and so that's definitely kind of what attracted me to Wisconsin. And I think, in terms of maybe what attracted Wisconsin to me was, I guess, just that mindset that I have is that I always did want to improve and I was willing to kind of go the extra mile and do what it took to get in the lineup and to have an impact at that level. I think that they could kind of see that in me at a young age.
Had nothing to do with your sister?
I don't know. I mean, definitely having her there helped out a little bit, having a familiar face and things like that. But yeah, so maybe a little bit. I never did play with her though, so
We
I
won't tell her anything. We won't give her credit.
don't.
So we mentioned you're from Canada. Your hometown is Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada. Did you have any difficulty with the transition to living from Canada to Madison, Wisconsin, the United States?
Yeah, for sure. I think the biggest thing was honestly Madison was quite similar to my hometown, Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, in some aspects, like population wise, it wasn't quite like I was moving to like New York City or anything like that. But I think the biggest thing was just being, the distance from home is that I was, 17, 8 hour, 18-hour drive, from Saskatoon. So that was probably the biggest kind of hurdle for me was just that, just how far I was away from home. And a lot of athletes will go to prep schools and things like that, but I actually stayed at home until graduating in high school. So,
And being born and bred in the northeast part of the United States, we know that Canada is a big country, but we forget how big it is. We think of the Midwest for us as, it's a big spot and we call it the flyover states from New York to California. But you just mentioned a 17, 18-hour drive
oh yeah.
from Madison, Wisconsin to where you're from. Like we can drive from New York to LA in half that.
hmm
Not
No,
quite half, maybe two-thirds.
yes,
That's insane.
no, it really is. It's a far distance, and I will say that kind of when I was there at Wisconsin, it was when all the COVID stuff was going on. So I mean, it wasn't always the easiest to kind of get to and from home. So that added another like kind of step or hurdle, I guess you could say. But yeah, in terms of like my parents trying to get down for games and me trying to get home for Christmas, things like that, it wasn't the easiest during those times. But
Hence the creation of Zoom, and thank God for that, right?
exactly, yes.
So the Badgers have won 8 NCAA national championships since 2006. And as I mentioned, they're the most successful women's college hockey program in the history of the sport. That kind of tradition has major implications for every player in terms of expectations, culture, identity, and opportunity. Did you feel pressure even before you played your first game for the Badgers?
I think so. I think there's kind of just an unspoken like expectation that we are meant to win, like having that kind of history and track record and, with the talent that you'd look at the sheet and the roster and things like that. There is kind of an unspoken expectation that we do need to be winning every game. And so there was definitely some pressure that I had felt, but I also knew that it wasn't just me, it was kind of the team as a whole and we are all there for the same reason. We, at the end of the day, we just wanted to win. And so kind of having that common goal, I do feel like it was pretty validating and it felt like we were all kind of united and together as one and moving in the same direction. So there was a little bit of pressure, but I think that we all, relished it. And yeah.
I mean, I look at that and I'm thinking blue chip program. I mean, that's like you kind of Duke for men's college basketball, Notre Dame or Ohio State or something like that for men's football or Alabama. That's daunting.
Yeah.
But also, you want your name, you want that ring, you want that trophy, you want to be part of that tradition, part of that history. And so it's a special type of a player, an athlete, a breed, a mindset that attracts individuals to that program. And so you know what the challenge is when you're walking in, and you're accepting that challenge before you walk in. And so that's a tremendous compliment to any athlete for any one of those programs. And for you to walk in there and your sister to walk in there and to do it not once, but twice is a huge kudos and compliment to you and to the program. And so I just want to say congratulations to you and your sister in the program. So that's just an amazing accomplishment.
Oh, thank you. No, I really appreciate it. Yeah, it's definitely something that we hold a lot of pride in and things like that. And yeah, again, I feel very, very grateful to be a part of that program and to have accomplished that we did during our time there. But yeah, definitely super special. Thank you.
How heavy is that trophy when you hold it up?
Oh, it's pretty heavy. Yeah, I'm thinking back to some moments like girls. Yeah, no, it's a heavy trophy, but yeah, definitely just super cool.
I'm sure it felt pretty light at the moment.
Yeah. Oh, exactly.
What was it like stepping into the intensity of college level competition?
Yeah, I mean, definitely kind of a ton of pressure, I think that I had mentioned, like going up against those girls who are, kind of the best of the best, whether it was in practice or whether we're, playing the Minnesota Gophers, who had a ton of talent as well. It was kind of our rivals or Ohio State. Um, it was definitely such a jump from high school. And so, yeah.
You mentioned having your sister Sophie there was nice as a familiar face. Did having her there make it easier for you, or was she the kind of big sister who didn't cut any slack? And did you ever have to compete against her?
Honestly, it made it so much easier for me. My sister's the type of person, she knows that I'm pretty hard on myself as it is, I think. And so she's always been so supportive. She always just kind of, wants the best for me and things like that. So I wouldn't say she's ever been, too hard on me or anything like that.
I just mentioned Wisconsin being a blue chip program for women's hockey. What's it like to play hockey at the highest level? How many fans show up? What are the facilities like? How long's the season? How you mix practice and games with homework?
Yeah, for sure. So, in terms of how many fans show up, Wisconsin draws, I want to say upward of about 2,000 fans a game, which is honestly pretty insane. They kind of pack. We have our own rink there, LeBon Arena, and they pack it. So, it's really special. And then in terms of how long the season is, so it starts kind of later on in September and it runs up until around March. I know that, if we are in the Frozen Four and stuff, it was kind of mid to the end of March. So it's definitely kind of a long, taxing season. Obviously, always worth it. But and then, yeah, in terms of the facilities, they're second to none. Like I remember people would always say, we get treated like gold there, and we really did. Like just the best workout facilities, training areas, just ice surfaces, things like that. We really did get treated so well. Um, and then last question was just kind of about the travel. And so, yeah, being at a team like Wisconsin, a lot of the teams that we had faced were actually in Minnesota. So we were traveling about 4 to 5 hours, kind of I would say every other weekend. And then there were some outlier teams. So there was Bemidji, and then there was Ohio State. And so in those kind of road trips, we would actually take a charter plane, which was super cool to go to those games. But definitely a lot of travel involved. We had great advisors and tutors, things like that, that were really helping us to communicate with professors for anything that we were missing and just to make sure we were all squared away with our schoolwork.
Academics first, right?
Yes, always.
You were a three-time academic All Big Ten Conference honoree. How were you able to accomplish that feat three times when obviously the majority of athletes never do it once?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it a little. Well, I guess just the kind of the tutors, the learning specialists, like all those resources that we had were super helpful. They were wonderful. And I think for me personally, just kind of growing up, my parents always emphasized the importance of school and kind of prioritizing it. When I was growing up, there wasn't a professional women's league for hockey, and so there really wasn't any way to make a living playing the game. So I always knew that in the back of my mind, school was kind of the most important and took precedence.
And few people can say they were on a national championship team. Far fewer can say they were on two national championship teams. And it must be a very, very select group who won two national championships with a sibling on those teams. Describe your feelings. Is there anything that can compare?
Honestly, no, nothing can compare. I always say I still can't put into words. And honestly, like it was such a special experience. I'm so proud of, the groups and all the girls that, when we did win those national championships and then just being able to experience that with my best friend, my sister, it was something that I will cherish for the rest of my life. And, certainly look back at it with a smile and just the absolute best memories.
So, Grace, you struggled with self-doubt even though you were playing for the most successful team in women's hockey history. Your mental health experiences as a college athlete were not unusual. And a recent NCAA student athlete health and wellness study found 44% of women athletes reported feeling overwhelmed most every day or constantly. How did you address your self-doubts, and how did players you knew deal with their mental health challenges?
Yeah, I think the first part about kind of addressing self-doubt is number one, just kind of recognizing it, reflecting and then being able to have that sense of awareness that that kind of was going on. And so for me, I think that I was really able to address it once I started to recognize that, self-doubt and kind of maybe a lack of confidence was impacting other areas of my life. It was beyond just hockey and, performance and things like that, but it was starting to kind of impact my relationships with people, specifically kind of my loved ones. So that's definitely, kind of what brought me to address the issue. And I think for every athlete, it's different. Some find that maybe talking with loved ones, talking with teammates, coaches, or seeking out some of those professional resources kind of help them. And so I do think for everyone it's different, but definitely is important just to know you are not alone, and there are so many people that you can turn to that want to support you.
I always want to highlight a professional football team, the Indianapolis Colts. The late owner, Jim Irsay, created a program a few years ago called Kicking the Stigma. And I just want to highlight them, and his daughters who've taken over the team have now really keeping that on. And so I know that athletics is a big thing where people try and sugarcoat things. So I just want to give that as just sort of elevate that. And if you can hear my dog Zeke, he's looking for some attention right now. I'm sorry, he's going through some eye troubles right now. Hi, buddy. Uh, Grace, what was the source of your self-doubt and how long did that go on? I mean, you played at the highest level. What did your inner dialogue sound like during that period? And were you your own toughest critic?
Yeah, I would say the self-doubt, I would say a lot of it was just kind of that not being able to, make those transitions from I was that top player in high school and now I'm going into a way where maybe I'm not getting the minutes that I was, or, there was probably some comparison with other athletes, maybe, or more so just at that level that I was at my high school and the, kind of the role that I had on the team and the impact that I was able to make day in and day out of every game. So I was definitely that was probably at the, kind of the source of my self-doubt. I would say inner dialogue, just, being afraid to make mistakes, certainly, and then just kind of, gripping my stick too tight, trying so hard to do everything I can when I think, the bigger underlying issue is just not having the confidence in myself. And so I think that was kind of, a little bit about, I guess that inner dialogue. But I was definitely my own worst critic for sure. Like I mentioned, I've always been someone who's I had such high expectations of myself. I'm not always easy on myself. And so I was definitely kind of, beating myself up a little bit. So
You talk about gripping your stick too tight. What were some of the signs or red flags that you wish you or someone else had recognized sooner?
I think just maybe towards like kind of the tail end of high school and just maybe not enjoying the game like I should be, taking it so seriously and just trying so hard. I think that was kind of a sign. And I will say that there were a ton of people that kind of brought it to my attention. Like, just remember, it's a game. It's supposed to be fun. You just scored. Like, you're supposed to smile. You just scored. And so I think that was definitely kind of an early sign that I wished I would have maybe kind of listened to, because there were certainly people that were kind of bringing it to my attention. But that's definitely something that I wish I would have paid more attention to early on.
So you just mentioned that this was actually something that started for you in high school, but you didn't really pay attention to it. How long into your collegiate career did it go on until you actually realized what was happening?
Yeah, I would say it was probably maybe first 2 or 3 years, I would say, before I really started to kind of get a handle on it, um, and really kind of seek out those supports, and really try to do what I can to just help myself out, and kind of allocate those resources to do that. So yeah, I would say it was probably about first 2 or 3 years in college.
When things got hard mentally, how do you usually cope? Looking back, how do you wish you'd handled things?
Yeah, I would say looking back, I used to just like turn inwards, try to figure everything out on my own. Sometimes would try to open up with like loved ones, things like that, but in the early stages really wasn't seeking like some help from sports psychologists or anything like that. So definitely, if I could go back and change some things, I certainly would have kind of reached out sooner, and just been willing to kind of have those conversations with people, and open up about some of the internal struggles that I was dealing with.
What are the biggest barriers to keep athletes from seeking mental health help?
As far as I think that we have come in terms of ending the stigma, I definitely do think it's something that is still apparent, and it does still, impact, athletes and the rate at which they'll seek out those resources. I think that maybe just a fear, or embarrassment or things like that, is something that can get in the way of someone, reaching out for help.
And it's too bad that that's still happening. I've said on many of my shows that as awful as COVID was, the one positive thing it's done is it's put a big spotlight on mental health. I've talked about the tsunami we've had post-COVID of mental health in terms of, your generation. You're about the same age as my oldest daughter in terms of, uh, being locked down for her junior and senior year of high school and then going to college and not knowing what the hell to do and to meet with people and transition. But then also, high intense athletes like yourself. I finished my doctorate dissertation a year and a half ago, focused on police officers not seeking mental health treatment. And so these high performing individuals, first responders, military, professional and collegiate athletes, they're afraid of that stigma associated with it. And they shouldn't, because at the end of the day, they may have a cape on, but they take their cape off when they go home. Their cape has to go to the dry cleaners every week or so. And so I get it. They don't want to show that they're human,
Mhm.
but you take your cape off and you take your shoes off and you put your pants on one leg at a time like everybody else. And so I want to thank you for being outward on this and for being a champion on this, because it takes more people like yourself, like a Michael Phelps, like Jim Irsay and his family in the Colts. And the saying is it takes all of us. And so I just want to thank you for being a champion for that, because I know it's not easy. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that.
What helped you find the courage to change course and ask for help?
I think that honestly, when I started to kind of reflect and just see the impact that it was having, on just my life ability to balance things, was probably the point that I'd said, okay, like I really need to, actually ask for some help. I think that in terms of the hockey and kind of beating myself up, maybe I could have gone on like that. But when it started to kind of impact like my level of gratitude and just my ability to like maintain relationships with my family, it just felt like that hockey was like pulling into other, aspects of my life. And it just didn't feel right. I wasn't feeling fulfilled, things like that. And then, so that's definitely kind of when I went out and definitely sought kind of um, some external supports.
Did the culture at Wisconsin support mental health and personal well-being?
Absolutely. Yeah. That is certainly one thing that I am so grateful for is that, when you stepped in, we talk about the tradition of excellence and, that winning culture and everything. But honestly, from the coaching staff down, the way that they hold their organization. And I will say the same thing goes for Providence. And even just here working at Curry, like I can see that I think at the foundation is just like a genuine care for the human being, first and foremost, just to make sure that they are well, that they're taking care of themselves because, regardless of anything that is the most important, it translates into everything, whether it's sport, school, everything, it has such an impact. So, um, yeah. And then those resources that I had, from sports psychologists to counselors to, um, even coaches that were always, checking in to see how you were doing and things like that. I really can't thank them enough, and I've so much gratitude for each of those institutions and how they've really supported the overall well being of students.
You've talked about learning to give yourself permission to not be perfect. What did that process look like for you?
Still ongoing, work in progress. But I think the biggest thing is just realizing that looking at maybe mistakes as learning opportunities, areas to grow and get better in life. Like I think I used to just look at mistakes as failures and I was so scared to make them. But I think just having that different approach and looking at that, they are inevitable, it's going to happen, but it's like it's a learning opportunity and it's just a way to evolve. So that's definitely been something that's helped me.
A lot of my previous guests that we've had on here talking about mental health have used that same phrase, give yourself permission. Could you go a little bit deeper into what that means for you?
Honestly, I always say like give myself some grace. Like it's kind of like it works because my name's Grace, but yeah, just like taking a step back and again, like I am so hard on myself. So just being like, you know what? Like I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. Like, allow myself not to be perfect. Um and I think that's definitely been, yeah, I'll always say like give myself some grace. Like, okay, it's gonna be okay. I'm not perfect, nobody's perfect. These things are gonna happen. It's just kind of a matter of how I bounce back and how I pivot, you know.
I'm smirking and smiling because I think at least 90% of the guests have said the exact same phrase of give yourself grace.
Yes.
I swear it's at least 90%.
That's awesome.
So, how did being in that elite environment help you grow, not just as a player, but as a person?
Yeah, I think being around such high level performers just kind of forces you to stay motivated, stay, um, inspired to continue to get better. And I do look at, at Wisconsin specifically within our team, like the girls that were always trying to get better on the ice, but then off the ice, the academics was a huge part of, it was something that was stressed and it was very important. So always trying to, reach for that next grade and things like that was always very important. So I just definitely do think that being in that environment, that winning environment, always trying to improve was something that's, definitely kind of helped me to adopt that mindset.
What lessons from being part of Wisconsin's elite environment are you now carrying into your advocacy around athlete mental health?
I think that everyone and anyone should be and can be asking for help. I think that sometimes we look at an athlete who is just, the highest performing athlete, they're doing amazing, and they are still seeking those resources. You may look at someone's life and think it's perfect, but it's not, and that's never the case. You never really know what's going on behind closed doors. So I think just kind of recognizing that it's not the athletes that are struggling or maybe not getting the playing time that they want that are seeking those resources. It is the highest and the best performing athletes that are also doing that because they're just looking to constantly get better. And again, like the mental health side of it, that is such a foundation for being able to translate into your on ice performance or any sport for that matter. So I think just kind of having that overall understanding and recognition that really those high performing athletes and individuals are definitely utilizing those resources.
And many athletes talk about the loss of identity when they stop competing. Did you experience that, or did you finally feel free from that pressure? And what was that like emotionally for you?
Definitely have experienced it. Still kind of, coping with it to this day. I think that I've been away, or I guess not quite away from the game. I'm still very much involved in the game. My sister plays, so I'm always, going to her games, and I have some opportunities for some mentorship and coaching that I really, um, take a lot of pride in. I'm excited for. I will say that it was definitely real for me. I think that growing up, hockey was such a big part of my life. It, shaped who I was. To this day, it is still such a big part of my life. So, emotionally, it was tough. It kind of led me into some questions like, well, if that was such a purpose of mine, right? I had these goals, these expectations, and I was constantly driving towards those. And, kind of once I stopped playing, it was like, well, now what? Um, so that was definitely something that, I experienced and still kind of am experiencing, but it does help to stay around the game and involved in it as I am right now.
Competing in college athletics, requires tremendous passion. What sparked your passion for mental health counseling, and how did you nurture it?
Yeah, I would say just what sparked my passion was probably the impact that providers have had on me. So whether it was talking with sports psychologists, counselors, things like that, just the impact that they had on my life, on just like my level of gratitude, things like that. They really helped to kind of transform where I was at in my life and in those times where I was struggling, whether it was self doubt, confidence, or, just kind of being so hard on myself. They had helped me so much. So that has really sparked my interest in, getting into the field because I certainly would love to have kind of that impact on an individual in the future.
And describe the moment when you realized that your story could actually help others. When was that? And what inspired you to start advocating for athletes' mental health?
I actually think it was at the NCAA conference, and that was the beginning of last February. I'd gone to the conference in Indianapolis, and they had shared my story. And I feel like just kind of some of the responses that I had gotten or received from people back at Providence and, some people from Wisconsin, younger athletes reaching out to me to say, like, hey, can we hop on a phone call? Can we chat about some things, your experience and whatnot? I honestly think that was kind of that turning point where I'd realized that there are people that resonate with my story. And so that was certainly the time where I felt like, my story could, help out some younger athletes or just individuals in particular.
And I think that's the story I read that led me to reaching out to you.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
The headline of a recent story again about you reads From NCAA champion to mental health advocate, Grace Shirley's journey beyond the ice. How did you find the confidence to share something so personal publicly?
Yeah, I think just kind of keeping in mind the impact that it would have on younger athletes, being able to provide my experience is, it was vulnerable. I didn't feel that was kind of the first time that I'd really opened up about that. So, as difficult as it kind of was, in the back of my mind, I just remembered that this would be able to help one individual, whether it was the younger version of me who was in high school and is, kind of gearing up for that next chapter in my life, college, things like that. I just wanted to share my experience and with hopes that it would, resonate and help to validate maybe some of those experiences of those younger athletes. And um,
And after that story came out, did you find people reaching out to you?
yeah, certainly I did. Like back at Providence for sure. Then even Wisconsin, I think even to this day, I'll still have kind of, some younger female players that would like to reach out to hop on a Zoom or to hop on a call. And I take a lot of pride in that. Honestly, I really appreciate them reaching out because I know it's not easy on their end to do that as well. But I'm always happy to kind of, sit down, chat with some of the younger athletes, kind of figure out what's going on in their life and maybe provide some guidance or um, some support in any way that I can.
Anyone doing even the shallowest Google search can find countless stories and videos of parents behaving badly at their children's games and even assaulting referees. In your experience, how's the behavior of parents, and especially bad behavior, have on their children and other children?
Yeah, I think that, as kids, we look up to our parents so much. I know for me, my parents were my two biggest role models growing up. And so just kind of having that understanding of, your kids are looking up to you and they're watching kind of what you're doing and the way that you treat others is so important. And so luckily for me, I definitely don't think I was ever in that situation to kind of, see maybe another athlete kind of witness their parents, behaving as such. Um, but yeah, I definitely think that's something that does go on, right? And it happens in the game, but I think just kind of having that, keeping that in the back of your mind that those kids are always looking up to their parents and things like that. So setting a good example is always so important.
What advice do you have for parents so they raise well-adjusted, happy young athletes, or is that expecting too much in today's hyper-competitive world?
Definitely, it is a hyper competitive world for sure. Kids have minds of their own. I know that I did. But I guess just one tip is just to kind of always, keep an open line of communication um, with your child, and just making sure that they always know that, you know, they can always turn to you for support. I think with me, I feel so blessed and so grateful. My parents are like my two best friends, really. I can turn to them and I feel comfortable kind of having those conversations. So I would definitely encourage just that open line of communication, and that way you're able to check in on your child and just make sure they're kind of in a good place.
Your long-term career goal is to become a counseling psychologist. Do you plan on focusing on athletes as clients?
I definitely think that I would find my way to athletes. I think as I kind of enter the field, um, definitely kind of focusing on like general population, and then from there maybe segueing more into kind of the athletes. Just because based on my background, my experience, and things like that, I do feel like I would, kind of have a lot to provide and to offer. And so I do think that I am kind of directed there, and I feel like eventually, kind of as I get more familiar in the field, I'll kind of certainly find my way back to athletes.
Just the North Pole for you, right? North Star.
Exactly. Yes.
When you look at younger athletes today, what worries you the most and what gives you hope?
Something that worries me, maybe just kind of, not quite having fun with the game, or maybe taking things too serious, similar to my experience. I think that I was, so focused on my goals, my expectations that I set for myself, that I kind of started losing um, that sense of, it is a game. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be something that makes you feel good. So that's maybe something that worries me. Something that gives me a ton of hope is, with kind of the rise in women's sports, specific, I guess I'm biased, but with hockey and the PWHL and that whole expansion, I think that, young girls having that to look forward to. It's like our NHL, things like that. So that gives me so much hope, and just, um, I honestly feel so excited for the next kind of generation when I speak with girls that are kind of entering that, college transition, and things like that. I get so excited for them because, they have college, but they also have these options beyond. So very exciting.
Thoughts about going into coaching?
I thought about it a little bit. I don't know. We'll see. I'm kind of starting off slow, like I have some opportunities kind of this spring and summer to kind of help out with some mentorship and kind of assistant coaching, things like that. Just kind of weekend tournament opportunities. See how that goes. And then maybe sometime in the future. But yeah, definitely want to stay around the game. It's shaped so much of my identity. So I definitely won't be letting go of the game anytime soon.
Here's a curveball for you. Thoughts
Okay.
about writing a book combining mental health, coaching, and sports?
Actually, don't think I've ever thought of that. I
Just
feel
putting it
like
out there for you.
I might have to brush up on my reading a little bit. I think I should be reading more first and then getting
Fair
some
enough.
coaching. But might be something to look forward to. We'll see if that's in the cards for me.
Just putting it out there. If you could redesign the athlete experience, how would you build mental wellness into it? And what role should coaches and athletic departments play in normalizing mental health conversations?
If I could redesign, I think that honestly, kind of from the get go, is as soon as you have, student athletes and individuals coming onto campus and things, just making mental health just such a priority. I think that honestly, at those three institutions, Wisconsin, Providence, and Curry, I see so much of that, within the initiative of the colleges. Whether it's, doing wellness events or de-stress events, things like that. Just making it very well known that, the most important thing is for the person to be well, because that does translate so much into everything else. Whereas it's, the relationships, your performance, anything like that. And then remind me of that second question. Sorry.
And what do you feel that what role should coaches and athletic departments play in normalizing the mental health conversation?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think that they have a big role. I think that, if coaches and people are willing to have those conversations with athletes, certainly. I know that my coaches always were very open and willing to kind of have those conversations. And if things do kind of go deeper or beyond a scope that a coach or someone feels comfortable addressing, then, certainly making a referral to more of a professional resource. But I definitely think the kind of willingness is huge.
Last question for you here. What daily or personal practices help you protect your mental health now? And what advice do you have for others in that respect?
So, things that I practice is that's actually such a good question. I love this question. For sure, gratitude number one. Just being able to step back in our busy, crazy lives and just take time to appreciate everything in your life is super important. Also, finding ways that kind of make me feel good, make me feel happy. Whether it's working out, reading, reading. I'm trying to read more. Listening to podcasts, going on walks, calling loved ones, things like that have really helped me. And so, for advice for others would just be to really kind of reflect and assess things that do fill your cup, that make you feel good, because I do think that makes such a big difference.
Grace Shirley, member of two NCAA Women's Ice Hockey Championship teams. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
It was an honor and a real pleasure. Thank you so much. I'm Chris Meek. We're out of time. We'll see you next week, same time, same place. Until then, stay safe and keep taking your next steps forward.